Great to see you here again. My name is Luc de Ceuster, founder of the Ceuster Academy, and in this video I'm going to talk specifically about allocating human resources. What are the things that are specific related to people? Now, before we start, don't forget to click the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. So let's have a look what is specific about human resources, adding people. Now, selecting people to complete activities is not always as simple as selecting materials and equipment. Materials and equipment have very objective descriptions, characteristics, while with people it's a little bit different. Now, the simplest thing to consider when we're looking at allocating people to activities is the availability and the skills of the resources. Availability is according to the calendar, and the skills relate to training, certifications, and previous experiences that we have with these people. Now, when we look at the completion of an activity and to complete it correctly within the reserved time frame, the people that we allocate to the different activities must have the necessary skills at the desired level. Now, when the skill level is different, lower, it will mean or it will result that the activity will take longer to complete, while when the people have higher skill levels, in general, we expect that the activity will finish faster. When we use overqualified people, it may be interesting, but it's not always the case. So we have to be careful what we do here. I have a very good example of a friend. It's already some years ago. He was working on a project, making a very good hourly rate. He had to do some copying, and he requested to the people he was working for that the secretary would do that. They didn't want to do that, so basically he had to take the copies himself, and basically it was very funny because he said it was the simplest job I ever did and the highest payment I ever received just for copying. Just imagine you have a project manager that costs you $1,000 or €1,000 a day, and you tell this person to make the copies him or herself. It's an overkill. So you have to be careful what you do here. It was quite stupid by the people to do that. They would have saved a lot of work if the secretary would have done this. But okay, it can happen. Now, when we have to look at human resources, we also have to see they are only available as we agree upfront. So, for example, if somebody will work for your project for 8 hours, that means 100%. When they work for your project 4 hours, that's again 100%. And it's impossible to overutilize the people. You cannot use them over their allocated time. Now, when we look at resources, we also consider the element of overtime. And when we look at overutilization, means that we are allocating people more than 100%, 100% being the number of hours they have been allocated on the job. So basically, after 4 hours of work, the resource has to go back. So that's what we typically look at overutilization. But we also have to look at what we call overtime. And overtime means that we are working longer than the standard 8 hours per day or 40 hours per week. And I know in some countries like US, other countries, the standards may be different. People may be working a lot more hours per day, per week, and so on. So people have different habits. In Europe, and typically we have 8 hours per day, 40 hours per week. But what is the thing when we look at those other countries when people are working more than in, for example, Europe, we see that the standard can be different, and we have to take into account the standard as it is. Now, one of the things that we have to take into account is when we have to identify what happens when people work overtime. Now, overtime means working more than those 8 hours, working more than, let's say, that's interesting for the people because the body needs to recuperate. And in some cases, when people are working too long, too many hours, it will lead to a reduced performance and increased errors. Overtime has been studied in many cases, and it's not because you are working more hours that you will perform more work. On one side, perhaps it looks as if you're working more, but it can also mean that the quality of your work is not what you expect. The best thing is to have people who are completely rested to do the job that is performed. I don't say I'm against overtime. In certain cases, we will use overtime. I never use overtime as a standard of planning. I can use your overtime later during execution when we have to do some extra work, when we have to push something through in special circumstances. But we have to keep in mind that too much overtime will have a negative effect. It's very important to rest sufficiently. When we rest, we have new energy. We can do the work better, and the quality of our work will be higher. We make less errors, and at the end, we gain instead of losing. Another element to consider when we look at people, we have to look at the cost of human resources. And we have to understand how this cost will have an effect on your project. Now, when we have people with many skills and experience, there is an advantage over people with lower or no skills at all and limited experience. But these people are more expensive. We have to select the people that are optimal for your project. It can be a mix of people with high level of skills, lower level of skills, people who are apprentices, and so on. We have to find a mix to maximize performance and quality. It will not work when you only put the best people together. You have to create a team. And that means that you have to select the people not only on skills, but also on other characteristics. We will talk about that later. Now, we think we will select the people with the highest skills and qualifications, but it's not always the best way to do it. It depends on you. You have to evaluate how will we, in fact, use the people for the specific project optimally. Now, we have to look also at selecting resources. When we look at people in this case, we also have to consider urgency, and we also have to look at critical and non-critical activities. Critical activities will need more attention. We may have to put there people with higher qualifications. Now, we also have to take into account the personality of the people. Now, when we allocate people to activities, when we look those people, we also have to consider their personality. We have to see, first of all, what do the people like to do? What are their favorite type of jobs? And we have to see what are their skills, but also the personality when they have to work with other people. I remember talking with some colleagues, and when we were looking at the people, we were finding out that some people worked well together. For example, a colleague of mine, she didn't like to do certain things that I like to do, and we made an agreement that we would share the work. I would do the things she doesn't like, and she did the things that I don't like. Now, putting people in a team or in a group, it's not enough to call it a team. Getting a team is first starting with a group of people with the skills, with the different personalities, and bring them together. Once the people are brought together, the team can be formed. But a team is in fact not the same as a group of people. We have all those people with different personalities, and we can also identify people who we call leaders, and we also have followers. When you add too many leaders to a team, it may lead to conflict. Those leaders will start fighting to be the person in lead. to be the alpha on the team. And when there is no leader, the team may be there completely disorganized. Now today we have different problems, different ways of dealing with teams. We look at or self-organizing teams where leadership is considered in a different way. But we have to take into account that all these personalities come together and we have to find a way that they cooperate optimally. An optimal team or a group of people working optimally together is basically a team. Now, that was it for this first part about human resources and personalities. We will be looking at other aspects. Anyway, that's the end of this video, but don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. Thank you very much and bye-bye.